two, one. Hey, I count down every show now because I do not use a show open. Welcome to Slightly Off Axis Podcast. The countdown ensures that all those socials connect up and we all get out to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And tonight we have Mike Haddad with Astro Restoration Project. Mike was here last week. He was unable to participate properly because of being on mobile cellular, and we brought him back this week so that the audience can watch and learn more about Astro Restoration Project. So, if you would, I will switch my camera. I will get ready to bring Mike in, and we've got Mike here. Oops, and I brought the other camera in. Have to take that camera out. So, Mikey, and hang on, let me make it more friendly. That's more friendly.
Good.
So, you're with the Astro Restoration Project. I'm just going to go over for any portion of the audience that maybe didn't watch last week. The Astro Restoration Projects brings the past to life, engaging future generations. It's a 501c, not-for-profit, all-volunteer organization dedicated to promoting science, engineering, technology, and mathematics education through restoration and preservation of the Astro payload, an ultraviolet astronomy mission that flew on the space shuttle. And Mike, just to tell the audience some briefly about you, you were involved in the initial Astro Restoration, the initial Astro project. I knew I would do something like that. Sorry. Okay. You were involved in the initial Astro project that was designed to fly on the space shuttle in 1986, what you and the team call Astro Zero. And it didn't fly because of the Challenger accident. And then you got involved and the team brought that back in the 1990 and 1995 flights of Columbia and Endeavour, respectively. And I will let you tell the rest of the story. So go right ahead, Mike.
Okay, yeah. I mean, once those missions were done, a lot of that hardware, especially the instruments, went back to their respective universities or centers or whatever. And then the support equipment that kind of supported those flights kind of got distributed out. And bottom line is make a long story short, is a number of it was being actually auctioned off. And this happens a lot of times where there's space hardware that collectors want. Well, my good friend Scott Vongen, who was on previously in Byron Bonds, and a number of other people kind of headed up kind of an effort to save the hardware. A lot of times what happens is that hardware basically goes to junk dealers. Sometimes goes to universities and that, but if it doesn't get transferred to that, it basically goes to a scrap dealer and they melt it down. And so Scott and kind of led a team, and I supported his team on saving some of that hardware. Some of it was with Astro, a number was for a number of missions. And basically Scott would go to the auctions and basically bid on this stuff so it wouldn't get melted down. And then we would basically save it. The idea was not to make a profit, not to sell it, but to get it to the people maybe who would want it, or museums, or just hold it for future efforts. Astro hardware was part of that. And so kind of what happened was over the course of time, the idea came up to, hey, the Smithsonian actually wanted to create one of the original shuttle payloads and put it on display up there in DC. And so Scotty, we'd had the Astro hardware. They told the story last time that a number of those pieces were actually saved from being destroyed. And kind of all the pieces started to come together. And that, hey, I think we could maybe put Astro back together. We got in touch with the people that had the instruments. We know those were good. And they basically, he told a story about resurrection, basically the cruciform, which is the main hardware support structure that the telescope's mounted to. They basically saved that from the junk heap, as well as some other components. And so when the idea came up that they wanted to do a shuttle mission, we had a number of the Astro pieces. Now, some of it, like the cruciform, that had been in storage for over 20 years. And the cruciform itself kind of, over the course of time, kind of got pretty messed up. The hardware was all there, but it was discolored. dirty. Some of the cabling was coming apart. The blanket material was all starting to disintegrate. And so as the Astro project says, well, let's see if we can restore all this stuff and bring it back basically to kind of a pristine kind of condition. When we were flying that hardware, it was basically, we would work in what was called bunny suits and smocks and the latex gloves. We never touched flight hardware with our bare hands. It was basically like working in an operating room on this hardware. It was going to fly in space and had to be pristine. Well, of course, we couldn't do that now in the restoration project, but we can come close to doing that. So we wanted to basically make it look like it did when it flew back in the 1990s. So this is 30 years later. We're trying to restore the hardware. And so, of course, the first pieces was the cruciform. They were able to actually, Scott and Byron Bonds, who's a Teledyne Brown engineer out of Marshall, good friend of ours for years. We worked with him at the Cape during all this original mission stuff. And here 30 years later, we tagged back up to do the restoration project. And so they basically, the Smithsonian at the time could not take it because they were going under renovation themselves. So they had the idea of why not take it to the museum in Huntsville, Alabama, basically where the hardware was designed and built, and do the restoration work there at their museum, do it on the floor. So people coming to the museum can see us work in real time, walk right up to the hardware, basically to a little fence we put around it. And so basically, as we're doing the restoration, we can also talk to the people and explain what we're doing. And so they were able to work that all out. And so that basically started in 2020, 2019, 2020. And so when we went to restore the cruciform, of course, it was pretty dirty. And kind of the way it was, so you had the basic structure, which is aluminum, because aluminum is very strong and light. And it's kind of like a honeycomb, to make it light and strong. That's the basic structure. And over that was this, what we call multi-layer insulation, MLI, basically thermal blankets to keep it thermally stable. And then the hardware would go over the top of that, the cable and electronics and all that. Well, we had the cabling and the MLI and the cruciform itself. Well, we says, well, let's see what we have to do to restore this. So first thing was we took off a couple pieces of the MLI, and it basically, what it is, it's an outer layer and then literally 32 layers of individual sheets of gold and other material that made up the blanket itself. Well, that underlying material basically was disintegrating over the course of all those 20 years. So all I had was the outer white part that we can work with. And so we pull the blankets off, and again, like opening a can of worms, we pull the blanket off, and behind it in the aluminum structure were a number of things. We found a number of things. Just an example was some dirt dauber nests, with over 100 dirt dauber nests, bird nests. And so, of course, all that had to be cleaned. So then, well, we opened a can of worms. So basically, we pull all the cabling off. We pull all the blanket material off. We get the basic aluminum structure. We got to clean all that out. Okay, again, because we're looking at, if this is going to Smithsonian, they're going to want it pristine. They're not going to want to have dirt dauber's nests sitting there behind the element. And so we cleaned all that up. Once all that aluminum was cleaned and polished and back to as best as we can get it, then, of course, we cleaned the blanket material. We pulled the material that was disintegrating, we got rid of it, redid the upper layer material, cleaned it, put that back on, and then we cleaned the cables. And basically, when we got it back together, it looked really good. It was nice and white and clean and kind of pristine like when we flew it. And then, of course, next thing was the instruments. So we went and got 2 of the instruments. Actually, there was one called the optical sensor package, which is actually a way of helping the telescopes point. Basically, what Astro was a 3 telescope package that would point at a galaxy. Well, of course, you need to make sure where you're pointing and how you're pointing. So the OSP would kind of help us do that. And then the Whoopee, which again, I'm going to mess up what the acronym is, but it basically came from the University of Wisconsin. Those were the first 2 kind of pieces to go on. Now, part of what happens here is when you do restoration like this is some of the stuff we saved, some of the stuff was gone. It was just didn't exist anymore. And some of that hardware was basically, the way it worked was you had the cruciform, and then you had brackets that mounted to the cruciform, and you had the instrument like the Whoopee that had its own brackets, and it had three locations. You would put those 3 together with the cruciform, then you run 3 bolts, one at each location, and that was how you install it. Well, the brackets were on the cruciform. Whoopee had no brackets. The brackets were gone, and the hardware was gone. We had no idea where any of that was over the course of all those years. Well, luckily, part of when we got in to the helping with the people at Marshall's helping us out was they have the original. They still had a lot of the drawings from 30 years ago in their electronic database. And so a friend of ours, she actually had saved what we call a drawing tree. Every mission had what's called a drawing tree. It's one sheet of paper and every drawing that we need for that mission on that sheet of paper. She had saved that for 30 years. So that was huge. And now we got a listing of all the drawings that made up the Astro payload. And so the idea was, okay, well, we know we got this hardware. This is what it's supposed to look like. So the stuff that's missing, we have to basically make. And to do that, we drawings. We took these drawings. We got the drawing numbers. We sent it to Marshall. Marshall had a great group, a great team there that got us those drawings. They were able to say, yeah, we see this drawing. We'll send it to you electronically. From there, we were able to do some more integration of the pieces that we needed to. And then the pieces we were missing, we actually had the Hutch, it was basically a group of kids that support flight hardware processing. And what they do is if you get them the hardware and a drawing, they could basically mill you that piece of flight hardware. Again, it didn't fly in space, or it could fly in space. And so we said, wow, that'd be great, because these 3 brackets we were missing for Whoopi, we didn't have. And so we gave it to them, and it was amazing. They created these 3 brackets that looked like the real thing. And so what that did, and of course, in the attachment hardware. And so what that allowed us to do now, we put the 3 brackets on Whoopi that didn't exist anymore. We had the 3 brackets that were still in the cruciform. They made the 3 bolts that went at each of the locations. So that then allowed us, and then basically taking the procedures that I had actually written, some of them back in the early 80s. We basically resurrected those procedures and used them to reinstall out of the hardware. One of those was Whoopi. And so we were able to install those brackets on. And then again, this is, okay, you're building new brackets. The brackets that are on the cruciform have been there and haven't moved in 30 years, but you're building new hardware on the other side, and you're building the interfacing hardware, the bolts. Is this going to fit? Because, things distort and all that. So basically we went on. It was a wonderful day. We had media there and everything, and it went on. Whoopi went on. The 3 bolts went in. It took us a little bit of time, but we got there. So that was the one instrument that's on there now. And then the optical central package, again, what happened there was luckily we had the brackets still on the cruciform. The OSP itself and the main bracket between that still existed. Again, that was something that Byron actually found in the weeds. And so we had the actual hardware that had gone together. So we knew that all that was going to fit, because that had not changed in 30 years. And so we basically just put that together. So those are the 2 pieces that actually make up the element right now. So if you go to Huntsville, to the museum, that's what you'll see on display. You'll see the cruciform all nice and clean. You'll see the Whoopi experiment, and you'll see the OSP. The other 2 instruments, the HUT and the UIT experiments, they're actually up in Washington, D.C. right now at the Smithsonian. And we're in the process of actually getting them shipped to Marshall. And so our next effort will be to put those other 2 instruments on. And hopefully we'll do that. We'll get them maybe this year, or if not early next year. And probably by next summer, hope to have those installed. And at that point, we would have basically the original telescope package that flew in 1990 integrated and basically it'd be 2023, which is huge. Now, of course, the way I got involved with it, when Scotty told me, hey, we're going to do this, I jumped all over it in a heartbeat. I said, man, I'd love to be able to especially reprocess the flight hardware we did 30 years ago to show everybody what it was like when it flew. And so it's just been awesome. I mean, of course, we got a long way to go yet. The idea is it will remain at Marshall for a period of number of years now from the way things are going. But eventually, that will be up at the Smithsonian in D.C. So that whole package will be eventually up in Washington on display. And that's our goal, is to be able to let people see this as it flew basically back in the 1990s.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. Yeah.
Very exciting. So how much did it shift, just through use? Like you said that it did fit together. I mean, did you have to remeasure everything, or did it just magically work after everything put together?
Well, we do what's called fit checks. When they built the brackets, I physically took the brackets before we mounted them to the telescope and fit them to the cruciform and say, hey, the brackets will actually go on, the bolts will go in. So we knew that the brackets, if they were lined up properly, would go on and fit. So we knew that was perfect, that we knew that they would physically go together. Of course, don't you put it on Whoopi, you don't know if they're kind of properly aligned. And again, the guys who were brilliant that worked on this, the original mission was very critical in alignment. So it was almost what we call a line-to-line measurement, where it's basically you had zero slop in any of the bolts, hardware, any of that, because they need to be really firm. Well, for this, we really didn't need that for what we're doing. And so things like the brackets themselves, they built them a little bit smaller. They built the bolts just a little bit smaller. They built the holes a little bit bigger. Basically gave us a little bit of play in case it didn't perfectly align. And that really did help. That allowed us to basically put everything together. So even though the cruciform over the years have been transferred, and kind of maybe twisted in that, it didn't very minor. And so we were able to actually get it to go together very well. So to answer your question is that pretty much was solid. It really hadn't changed much in 30 years, even with all the handling and moving of it around the cruciform before we went to the instruments. Yep. It was amazing it worked.
Good. That's wonderful. So I've been promoting the show while we've been going through the show. So if you see me pop in and out, I've been trying to push the show. Okay. I was very apprehensive about today with Hurricane Nicole, not knowing whether it would take the power away. And so I didn't want to heavily promote the show before I knew that the hours had passed and everything was stable and we could do the show tonight. And I can imagine that our viewership is low tonight just because of the hurricane, people that might tune in otherwise, but it is what it is. So yes, maybe sir. They'll watch later. We were going over in last week's show on Friday, a portion of the materials that were provided by the Astro Restoration Project. And I really don't remember what portion it was that you were supposed to speak on. Do you remember what portion you were speaking on?
Basically kind of what we were talking about restoring the cruciform and then some of the mechanics.
So you went over all that.
Yeah, my background, what I did at NASA when I was working there at Kennedy Space Center, I was mechanical engineering. My background's mechanical engineering. So we did a lot of mechanical connections, kind of installation of hardware, cabling, electronic boxes and instruments like that. We would be responsible for the crane operations that would put the instruments on. And so that's basically what I was going to talk about last week, was kind of what I mentioned this week about kind of doing that kind of work, what I was kind of responsible for. Yeah, it gives you a really good look at the Astro. Of course, off to the left, that's the flight. That's the on-orbit flight picture from the aft flight deck, showing the telescope package deployed in orbit. And then, of course, the graphic on the right shows you all that hardware. What we're working on right now is, if you look where it says the impact ring, kind of down the bottom left, everything up from that. So the cruciform and all that hardware you see there, that's what we're working on now. That's the part that we're integrating up in Huntsville. The remaining parts, which you see below that ring, impact ring, is what we call two space lab pallets, which is the U-shaped devices, and an igloo, which is electronic. That's basically where a lot of the brains were. All that hardware, we've got a pallet, the igloo, and a lot of that attachment hardware you see on the bottom there, which tells replaceable column and some of that other payload support strut assembly, those things. We have that hardware. We've got one of the pallets, and we can get the second pallet. So basically the idea is we build up the part that we mentioned before above the ring in Huntsville, and then all that stuff below, once it gets shipped to DC, we'll probably either integrate that stuff in DC or somewhere, and then basically we're hoping in the end that this will be what'll be on display in Washington DC. If not, we'll definitely do the cruciform. We'll definitely have from the impact ring up. That'll be definitely there. We could, if we can go all the way that we want to do, we'd have all that, everything you see in that graphic would be on display eventually. And again, we have all that payload support strut assembly. Scott, in his wisdom, was able to save a lot of that hardware. So what you're seeing is what really flew in space. This isn't mock-ups. This isn't recreation. The only thing, like I said, were those couple brackets on Whoopi and a few other things that we had to create ourselves. But right now we're trying, basically what you see is I would say 90% is flight hardware, is what really flew 30 years ago. It has almost 11 million miles on it. And that's what we want to do. But that gives you a good representation of the whole payload and what we're working on right now up in Huntsville. So that's a good graphic. And of course, the pictures are really wonderful. Love those on-orbit pictures. They're the best.
Yeah. I should probably change where we are positioned here so that people can see that picture better, that we're not over the top of it. The other thing I can do is I can full screen this too. So that maybe makes it a little bit bigger.
And again, from the graphic, you can see I mentioned HUT, UIT, WHOOPI. There's what the actual acronyms stand for. We use a lot of acronyms in the space business, and sometimes I forget exactly what it all means. But that's a good, that's really good. That's good. That's a good figure there, Ken. Good job.
Right. I don't know if there was any more to the package. I mean, I guess this shows where it sat in the space shuttle in the payload bay. And
Yeah,
for most people that know the space shuttle well enough, that'd be a given. But there might be a few people that didn't know that.
Yeah, the upper left photo you had in there was in the building where we did a lot of the assembly work.
And then this shows it as well.
Yeah. So the project itself. Yeah.
This is the highlights for people that missed last week. They should go back and watch last week.
Yeah, 2 missions. Originally, Scotty mentioned it, but originally supposed to fly 6 times. Dropped down to 3, and then they end up flying only 2 in the end. So
no.
To fly 6 times. They're supposed to be an Astro 6. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is great pictures. This is basically, you'll see the instruments to the left in 95. And then that's kind of the one in the center left was, I guess that was a cruciform. That was where they found the container that had the cruciform in it, which was just amazing. I don't know if Scotty got a chance to tell you about the OSP. Kind of what happened with him is he was in looking for other hardware, and he saw this big box that had OSP written on the outside of it. And he goes, gosh, could that be the flight optical sensor package? And so he went over to the box and tried to pick it up, and it was real heavy. There's something in here. And so he bought it, and when we uncrated it, we found the flight optical sensor package. And what that is if on the very right photo, you see this kind of the 3, it's got like the 3 lens or 3 baffles. That's the optical sensor package that was used. So he found the flight OSP and the flight cruciform. That's what you see those hard. And then the second from the right, that's Mike Sotelo. He's one of our volunteers, and he was one of the main guys that cleaned these blankets. I mean, it was amazing. We pulled these blankets off, and they were nasty. I mean, they had all kind of dirt and crud on them. It's by hand, cleaning these things by hand to make them look pristine. I mean, he spent weeks doing this. And of course, the idea is, well, how do you clean this stuff? And so we're able to get information and people who do restorations to give us ideas on cleaning fluid, on something material that you could use to clean so you don't scratch it, you don't destroy the material. So that's a great picture of Mike. Him and Scott and a few other people were the blanket people. Tia Ferguson, who's another engineer who actually still works at Marshall. Her and actually her family, her husband came and her daughter came and helped us clean blankets. So it's a team effort. We got a lot of people that really volunteer to help. But that's a great picture of Mike cleaning the blanket. It was a lot of work to do that. Yeah, and then here basically is what happens. We got the hardware development and restoration, and then we're trying to do the education, of course, and outreach. Part of that is to get people involved. It was interesting, and I know we didn't talk about this, and something I could bring up. I think Scotty had mentioned was handling this stuff. Okay, we wanted back in the day when we were lifting this stuff, we had these very fine operated cranes that we can move this stuff in very precise movements, because this stuff is, like I say, is you have to kind of align things very critically. We didn't have that. Okay, all we had was an open building, no overhead crane, no nothing. And so there's a local group that was there, Edwards. Did I get that right? Yeah, they basically are professional movers and handlers. Okay, well, they said, hey, we can support you guys. We can get something in here to help you basically lift these instruments and move this hardware around. Well, the one day he came to look at, basically early on, he came to look at the hardware and kind of just get familiar with what we're doing. We brought his 2 daughters, and they were, I think, 15 and 12 at the time. And I needed some help. I was actually redoing the cabling, and then part of the cabling is these clamps that the cabling goes on. You got to kind of push the clamp together and run a bolt through as a cable. So it's kind of tough to do it by yourself. So I got the 2 of them to help me put flight hardware together. So here's two girls, young, that just were just ecstatic about helping. And I definitely needed the help. And it just worked out that day. They happened to be there and I needed the help that day. And so his two daughters basically came and helped us work on flight hardware. And I says, see, you guys put this on your resume when you get older, because you're working on something very few people on the planet do. And that's just one example of the outreach, where people come and see, and then, hey, you want to help out? Come on in. And so we can use the extra hands. And so they just come there to look at it, and they helped me basically with, they spent a couple hours there helping me put this cabling back on, some of the cabling. So it was a great day. It was a wonderful day. And that's part of our restoration effort, is to get people who want to volunteer. Maybe I didn't work on this 30 years ago. And these are girls that weren't even alive when this stuff flew, but they wanted to help out. And so that's kind of what we're doing as far as outreach, is to get anybody who can help us, who want to help us. And you don't have to be expert in anything. You can help us. And there's lots of things people can do to help us. So you don't have to be an engineer or PhD in astrophysics to help us. Anybody can. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, be real exciting if I were younger and I didn't have, problems with my feet and that sort of thing, that just to participate, to do these different things. So I love listening to you talk about it. We talked about this last week, the inspiration of future generations. And I don't know if you want to mention anything more about that or not.
Sure. In fact, I want to correct myself. The people helping us was Kennedy's and Sons, not Edward Sons. It was Kennedy's and Sons, which are professional movers there in the area. Kind of what you see here, that's me in the top left, and that's when we were starting some of the work. Again, very detailed work. So I got a light that I can basically see, because the lighting in the room there wasn't the best. And so I got a handheld light that we're actually, going into individual pieces and doing what we need to do to clean them up. That's why it took so long, because we wanted this to look very good. And of course, the one on the right was offloading some of the hardware that we would end up eventually going into this building there at the United Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. So and that's the idea too. I mean, when these young girls help me with the cabling, that's inspiring future generation. That's getting them interested in whatever flight hardware may be flying in the future, and they could say, "Well, I worked on that stuff like that when I was 12 years old." So that's where our idea is to inspire the future generations, because they're the ones that are going to be taking us into the future. And this is one way to show them, hey, this is stuff that flew in space. Again, I think Scotty mentioned it, that Hubble and Webb and all those awesome instruments that are incredible, we won't see those again. You cannot put your hands on them. You cannot walk up to them. Here you can. And that was the idea, was that people can walk up to something that flew in space, and then, of course, and participate if they want to. And then, of course, that could maybe give them an idea of something maybe they want to do for their career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's
there was another photo there too. That was this one. So that was.
Yeah, what that is. Yeah, that's
I don't recall whether your team member was in this or if it was different people. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Trying to zoom in on it. Okay, yeah. Well, in fact, that's it. You see the picture there in the upper part. Those are the two girls that helped me. That's me on the right with we had the smocks on, and I have the hat like I have now. And then there's the youngest daughter next to me, and the older daughter to the far left. So yeah, that's a good picture. The girls, again, hey, we're working on flight hardware, so we got them in the suits, we got them with the gloves, we got them with the masks, because this is all pristine. So that was two of Kennedy's daughters, Mr. Kennedy's daughters, that helped me that day. And then what you're seeing in the bottom left, that's the optical sensor package. And that's some of the team, the kids that helped, I guess as part of the Hutch group, that helped create hardware that we end up using to put this hardware together. Yeah, that's a great picture of OSP. It shows the box itself is kind of has the instruments. The tube is kind of like a baffle, like you have on for the end of a camera, for example. You got a big thing, a baffle on the end of a camera, and then the large top part was that frame that Byron Bonds found out in the weeds. Yeah, it's all flight hardware. That's the stuff that flew. And so there's a picture of the kids when they were there the one day helping us get this hardware ready to install. That's a great picture. Yeah.
So there's another picture here too as well.
Yeah, this is basically our almost a full team. You'll see here. There's a number of people, like most of us in the restoration project have the white coats on or the blue shirts. Mr. Kennedy and his lifting crew have the yellow shirts on and the hard hats. Those guys were awesome. Some of the people in the middle you see right there, those are some of the people that work there at the museum and other aspects around Huntsville there. A good group of people. I think there's actually one of the people who was one of the scientists, I think next to Scott there. I think he was a gentleman that came from the University of Wisconsin. So yeah, this is a picture of the team right after we got installing Whoopi. In fact, Whoopi is, if you looked at three guys in the yellow shirt, that instrument behind him, you can see kind of the white and the black piece. That's the Whoopi going on. So that was right after that happened. So this is basically all those people that supported to make that effort happen. It was a great day. Yeah, kind of a little worried because, again, this is the first time this stuff's gone together in 30 years. And there was cameras there. I think they had 3 different news networks there, and they were basically recording all this stuff to be, put on the news later that night. And so we did not want to fail. We did not want it. We wanted to make sure all this worked. And so that was a great picture. Once we were done with the whole team there. Yeah, that was really good. That was a great day.
So if everybody wonders what we're talking about the Astro Restoration Project, bringing the past to life, engaging future generations. You can write to them at info@astrorestorationproject.org or visit their website at www.astrorestorationproject.org. So that's what we're talking about. We will put that up again. Right now, we don't really have an audience. They've been popping in and out. So I have a feeling that because of everything going on, we're going to have the audience later on. Maybe they'll ask questions and we'll wind up sending them your way.
Sure.
But
Sure. Yep.
Let me see what else we had in the presentations. There was a different presentation that looked like this. So let me bring that in. So have to remove that one. Oops, no, not that. I don't want to do that. I want to click on this. I don't know why it's okay. There we go. That's what I need to do. Sometimes when I'm doing this, I just forget what I'm supposed to do.
It's okay.
You know how software always is. They're always changing how it works and adding new features. So, okay, that one. ESP phased. I don't know if there was anything in this particular series of slides that was, and I need to bring us back on screen too. I don't know if there was anything in here that was important that you might want to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's basically that's kind of a summary of what I mentioned and kind of the future plans. Okay. Yeah, the different phases that.
I don't know if there's any really great photographs in here because.
Yeah, the picture on the right, that's what you would see now if you went to Huntsville. That's basically on display there at the Atrium Museum in Huntsville, Alabama. So that's kind of its current configuration. Yep.
Okay. And this is when they brought it in on the trailer in November 2020. The second caption reads that you were cleaning it at the Astrotech building on January 2021, and then there's the complete March 2021.
Yeah, the gentleman in the center picture, that's Craig Jacobson. He's actually an electrical engineer that worked with us at the Space Center, and we had him doing mechanical stuff. So we had everybody doing kind of everything there. Yep.
There's some pictures in here too. I need to click present so it takes out the preview. Did it present or did it not? I didn't click it right. There we go. Maybe make that bigger so they can see it at home.
Yeah, because
it's too small if I don't make it bigger. Can I push it to 2? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. The one on the left, of course, is the Whoopi. That was it going into the hall there in Huntsville. Scotty and I flew to Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, and just outside Wisconsin was where Whoopi was. And we basically helped with a number of people helped, but prep it for the move from there to Huntsville. And then, of course, we went down to Huntsville when it arrived there to then put it on display in the area. They gave us this big area. So initially, of course, Whoopi came in. It took a long time before we were actually able to install it. So it was sitting horizontal, like you see here, on display before it went vertical to go on the cruciform. The center picture is, again, one of those huge baffles for the OSP. This was another thing that was just amazing. Was we had the baffles, we had the bracket, but we didn't have the interfacing hardware, which was a number of different, very intricate pieces. I don't know. There must have been over, maybe, I don't know, Scotty would remember, maybe a dozen different pieces. You would think, oh, you just put the baffle on, you bolt it on, and you're done. No, it took, and Scotty actually at home had done a number of the pieces of hardware himself. The Hutch people built, so it was a group effort to be able to mount these baffles to the original bracket. Actually, we had to build the brackets. The brackets were one thing that was gone, so the brackets that mounted to that had to be built, and then the interface between the baffle and those brackets had to be built because that was gone. So we had the baffle, we had the main OSP, but the hardware between had vanished. And so this is basically a picture of them installing one of those baffles. There's 3 total that flew. Now, if you were to fly something like this today, basically the camera in your cell phone would do the job of this 450-pound instrument. So yeah. And then what you see on the right, that's a great picture. That's basically how we installed Whoopi. Here you've got Whoopi's in the vertical. You see the gentleman on the right with the shirt, and that's Whoopi behind him. And the lifting fixture, that's another thing. That blue silver lifting fixture, they had saved that. That was still up in Wisconsin after 30 years, which was huge because if not, we would have had to build that thing. So that was another piece of hardware. Somebody thought, let's save this because we may need to move this. And again, because it was inside this building, we couldn't get a crane in there. They got this propane-operated forklift with very fine movement. And so we basically used a forklift with that blue structure that then connected to the instrument to put the instrument on the cruciform. And this is the Kennedy people that are doing basically the installation. And they, of course, they do this kind of work all the time. They just don't work with flight hardware a lot of times, but they know how to handle things. And they were super. They knew it. They were professionals. They were smooth. They did a very quick and professional job. It's an awesome group of guys. They really helped us out there. Yep.
So the previous photographs, I guess, just see if I can bring that back. Just no, it goes by too quickly when it's zoomed. I guess I'll I'll leave it alone. There are acronyms in here.
Yeah, there's a number of other pieces. Yeah, that's some of the other pieces that made up the cruciform. Yeah, or the Astro palette. Yeah, yeah. We always had an acronym list because we always spoke in acronyms. In fact, there's many times where I forgot what the acronym meant, but I knew what it was. I could physically see it in my eyes, but I couldn't remember all of them. Like the Hutch, of course, that's a long one. We've had ones that are longer than that. Some of the acronyms you couldn't remember every word, so we just use the acronym. It's kind of our own little language, and it works most of the time.
But these are around. There's more of them. I don't know. There are a couple of diagrams here, but not too much.
Yeah, that one right there. Oh, right there. Oh, if we go back, what was it? The one with the yellow thing on it.
Now, the one thing about this scrolling this document, there we go.
Right there. There you go. And what that is right now, the cruciform is basically sitting on that back blade. What you see on the very left there, it's actually tilted up vertically, and it's sitting on that black blade, basically on blocks on the floor. Well, of course, we need to eventually move this hardware. We eventually have to take this cruciform and everything and move it to the Smithsonian. Right now, we have no way of doing that. And so the hardware that was used originally is gone. Again, that vanished. We had the drawings, and so we were able to give the people that are working on this some of the drawings. Again, I think this is the Kennedy people that are working on building this support stand. And kind of this is really neat. What this would be, and this is the concept, is we'd use this and would actually take the telescope package from a vertical orientation to an angle like you see here, and put it on display. The other thing is we put this on a rotating table, a huge rotating table. You see car shows and stuff, where they rotate cars. We would use something like that for this because this is, thousands of pounds. This is huge. And so the idea was to build this structure to let us display the telescope package in kind of a angled presentation, but then have a dual function. Basically, we would pull this little bottom, what you see on the bottom right there, that little stand, we would pull that out and actually add in supports. So this would it would duplicate display stand and also transportation fixture. You don't have to take this all this off of here and put it on another fixture to transport it. And so this is a dual function mechanism you see in yellow there, which will be used to display it, and then also when we transport it to Smithsonian. That's what the structure is. So that's another project we're working on now, to be able to take that and put it in this orientation, and of course eventually ship it to Washington, D.C.
So in space, was this held by the robotic arm and lifted up and out?
Really good question. Really good question. The very back plate you see there on the left, there was another piece of hardware called an instrument pointing system, which was just this huge mechanical device on a gimbal. Think of it as like a rotating ball or something, where you can move it in different orientations. The instruments pointing system, that's what was used to support this in space. Now on the ground, that wouldn't work. The IPS was designed to be able to rotate this and move it around in 0G, not in 1G. And so it basically would be pretty much set in place. In the previous picture where they had that payload support structure assembly, this would sit in that hardware, be launched in a vertical or in a horizontal orientation. And then once in orbit, there's latches that would be released. And then the instrument pointing system would take this whole telescope package and kind of rotate it up and point it. And the idea of the IPS was, okay, some of these, they'd have to focus on a star or a galaxy. Okay. Well, you're rotating around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. Okay. What the instrument pointing system did exact opposite of how the shuttle was moving. So the telescopes end up with it's going around orbit. Let me get my fingers. It's going around the orbit. It maintained that telescope's pointing in the proper direction. So it basically compensate for the movement of the orbiter. And so that was basically how that was operated in space. It was physically held down with latches for launch, but then those latches were released, and the IPS then did all the work on pointing it during the mission. And of course, before we came home, we restowed it, latched it into place, made sure it was good and solid, and then came home, landed. That's how it was launched and landed. Yep. Good question. Yep.
Yeah.
So this is kind of replacing that. Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else really in there. I think that's the end of that one. So let me take that one out.
Okay.
And let me see what else. Click back to here. So what was the other one? I had a couple more. I think this may be the same as that one. Yes. And this one was a little bit different. I don't know if that has much in it. It does have a couple of colored slides in it. So let's see. That's the information. So I'm not sure whether this has anything in it worth looking at that's different than anything else. It is smaller, so I have to adjust that and make it bigger.
Yeah, I think this is the kit that we give to people to explain kind of what all this is.
So there might be a couple of illustrations in this, but this basically goes over. Okay.
Yep. There you go.
Just kind of gives you a color shot.
Yep. Which is good. Shows you the different instruments. Now, again, what you see here is actually Astro 1, the experiment. You see the big telescope package, the blue, green, and red. That's the Astro telescope package we're working on. Kind of the orange device that's in the back there, that's what's called BBXRT. That only flew on Astro 1. On Astro 2, that was not there. So basically, that part of it where you see that orange device, that orange instrument, and the structure around it, we're not working on that part. We're only working on the part that the telescopes are mounted to. But that's good. That gives you that's actually Astro 1. That's all the hardware that flew on that mission, even though we were only focusing on the Astro telescope. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That's a good one, because there was a difference between Astro 1 and Astro 2. Yep.
A little bit of a different picture? I don't know, or is this about the same as the other one? It's kind of small right now, so let me make it bigger.
Yeah, I think that's similar to the one before, but this is the Astro 2, which did not have that BBXRT, that huge orange structure in there. It was just a telescope package. Yeah, this is a great information, because this, of course, if we're not there to tell the story, this is kind of the kit that gives you that information that we've been talking about over these last two sessions that you guys with.
There's a picture that's the gentleman in this picture at the top is Byron.
Yes. Yep. In the center.
And I'm not sure who this is next to him.
I think I can't see this. That's Scott. No, that's another gentleman. Yeah.
It's another gentleman. I think that was you, and it moved too quickly. But I think that's that same shot of you below that.
Yeah, that's me below. Yeah. But that's Byron, who's him and Scotty are the spearheaders of all this work. They're kind of leading the effort.
And this shows some more social media and such on this one too. That we did mention Astro Restoration Project.org, but it also has Astro Restore on Facebook, or Astro Restoration Project on Instagram, or Astro_Restore on Twitter. There is a YouTube channel, but you'd have to pretty much go find that one, because you know what, though, I will mention to you, so you'll mention to the team, YouTube is now allowing people to set their channel names. So whoever's responsible for your YouTube needs to set your channel name and get Astro Restoration Project when it becomes available.
Okay. That's good to know.
The email is there too, info@astrorestorationproject.org. Yeah, I'm really happy about what YouTube did, because that made it easier for me too.
Excellent.
So I just mentioned that so that you'll let them know about that.
Yeah, that's a good page there, because that's kind of how you get the information and the contact and all that. Yep.
So
never straight.
I forget what we had a couple of questions. Let's see if I can remember what I asked last week.
I remember you asked me how I was interested in the space program, how it all started.
Yeah, that's usually one of my original questions, so I would go with that one.
Okay. For me, I was actually born in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was young, but I was always interested in the space program even there. When I was 9, my dad says, "Hey, we're going to move to Florida, to this little town called Titusville, Florida." I go, "Where's Titusville, Florida?" You know Orlando and Miami and that. So I look up on the map, and Titusville, Florida is right across the Indian River from Kennedy Space Center. And I thought I died and gone to heaven. It's like, wow, we are moving right next to Kennedy Space Center. And so I moved down there, in an elementary school. It's basically right on the road, right? It was right on the water there, basically. And I remember when I was a kid, I'd sit there and I'd point across the water, and I said, "That's where I'm going to work one day. That's the only place on the planet I want to work, is Kennedy Space Center as a NASA engineer." And so as I grew up, I would focus on the classes that needed to be, math and science and that kind of stuff that would help with an engineering degree. And so, yeah, I basically grew up there. We grew up in Titusville, went to the University of Central Florida. Basically back then there was very little there, so we commuted. Got a mechanical engineering degree. Actually, it was interesting. I heard of the co-op program, which is where you can go to school and work. You basically go to school for a semester, then work a semester somewhere, and you could do that while you're in college to be able to get experience. Well, my brother had actually started the co-op program, and at the time it was called Florida Technological University. FTU was when it was created. He started the co-op program. When I got in 76, I started in university. I got in the program in 1979. And so I was actually co-oping at the Space Center for STS-1. Here I was a kid in college, and the group I was with was in the building. It was in a launch control center. It wasn't in a firing room, but it was in a support room that supported the firing room. And so basically it was interesting, because they told me, "Well, this is going to be kind of crazy, all these people. You better either come in a day early, or you're not going to make it in, because the traffic is, a million people coming to see the first launch." So basically I went in the day before, and I slept in my van in the parking lot. the day before STS-1. It was great. I mean, they had showers there, so you can shower, and they had the cafeteria open all night long because they knew people are coming in to support the mission. And so basically, I was slept in my van the night before and then supported STS-1 as a college student from one of the rooms in the Launch Control Center, which just, again, it was just, I just died and gone to heaven. This is the best. And so I co-opted until I graduated in 82, April of 82, 1982, with a mechanical and aerospace degree from the University of Central Florida. And then I went to work permanently at Kennedy Space Center. So that was kind of the history on how I got there. And then, of course, working the flight hardware I was there was just, again, it was the best job ever. Worked there for 32 years, basically started in 79, and then I retired in December of 2011. The last shuttle launch was in July 2011. I retired in December that year. And then, of course, the volunteer work comes up. And then, of course, when Astro came up, it says, I'm retired now, so I got a lot of time. So count me in. And so that's kind of how, from the history of me being a kid, getting into the space program to kind of where we are today. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that history, Mike. I've been looking just to make sure that we haven't had any questions on Twitter, but nobody's showing up with anything. So let me think about something else that I used to always ask. I guess, is there anything that you really want to tell the viewers that, like something that you support, a charity of sorts, beyond working on this Astro Restoration project?
Yeah, there's a group out of Maryland that's working on basically a moon. I guess it's what do you call it? Preserving the artifacts of the moon. The Apollo 11 site and all that. Now, we got all kind of countries that are landing on the moon, robots, and eventually there's going to be people up there. And this is actually a project I was involved with, part of from the NASA side before I retired in 2011. Was how do you preserve that stuff? How do you keep from a rover running over Neil Armstrong's first footprint on the moon? That's stuff that should be pristine, that should not be messed with. And so kind of what the group does is it figure out a way of basically have an international policy, I guess is the way to look. And I'm so far removed from this now, I'm not sure what the latest and greatest is. The idea is so what's up there is yours. And the only analogy I could think of is like it's an embassy. Okay. The Apollo 11 site, all the Apollo sites are like U.S. embassies. That's U.S. territory. Stay away from it. Don't mess with it, kind of thing. Have the rest of the moon, and so that's kind of the idea. So kind of doing that. I kind of do some consulting work and things like that, just to stay busy. Support actually volunteer at the Space Center, Visitor Center, and at the Kennedy Space Center to do tours. As for launches and stuff, we'll help be tour guides. Somebody wants a tour around the Space Center, we could be a tour guide. Was doing the Atlantis exhibit for a number of years where we would stand next to Atlantis, and basically as the people came up to Atlantis, we could answer questions. So it was kind of fun stuff, trying to stay involved with the space program and things, and of course the history of the space program. So that's kind of the things I've been working on in retirement, and of course traveling and just having a normal retirement like most people try to have.
Now, last week, your colleague Scott said that he was actually trained to be a mission specialist. That kind of takes me to a question that I used to ask people that were guests on the show. If you had the opportunity, would you want to go into space?
Yeah. One thing too is he actually was a payload specialist, alternate payload specialist. Kind of the way, and just people eventually see this maybe, is you have a number of different kinds of astronauts. You think an astronaut's an astronaut. You actually have like a career astronaut, which is like, and most of the time the commander and pilots are military background. Those are the ones that fly the shuttle. Then you have what's called mission specialists, which could be specific missions or multiple missions. Those are usually the scientists, engineers, and of course they could be military too. And then you have payload specialists, which could be basically focused on individual payloads. And that's what Scott was. Scott became an alternate payload specialist for the Astro series. And so his missions would have been the Astro missions if Scotty had a chance to fly. To answer your question, yes. In fact, I put in for the astronaut corps a number of years. And in 1998, I got an interview. I went all the way to the final group of the class in 1998. There was 121 of us. Scott also was in that group. They picked 25 astronauts from that 121 of us that were the finalists, but of course I didn't get picked. It was an interesting story, and if I could tell it real quick, it's kind of
we have plenty of time. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay. There's kind of things that go on during the selection process. It's a week-long activity where you go to Houston and they do a bunch of mental physical tests on you, and you learn things about what to expect and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of what happened was it was January, and normally the next group of astronauts start in August. Well, comes June, we still haven't heard anything yet. Well, I was going to vacation up to my relatives who still lived in Ohio. So I called the astronaut selection office, says, hey, don't call my home. I'm not going to be there. If the decision comes down for the astronauts, call this number where I was staying at my uncle's house. Well, I was up there on vacation. I actually went and did a social thing at my nephew's school. I get back to my uncle's house, and it's packed with all the relatives. And there's a note there that says, call the astronaut selection office. Okay. And I go, oops, this is it, right? This is it. Well, one thing we'd heard was if the head of the astronaut selection process, which at the time was John Young, if his name was there, you got picked. If it's any other name, you basically didn't make it, and they had to tell you the bad news. Well, Brian Duffy, who was an astronaut, a good friend of mine, I worked with him on some missions, his name was on there. And, of course, I knew right away I didn't get picked. But the whole family was there. And so I could, I don't think I got picked. And so I call him up, and Brian goes, Mike, I know what you're thinking. I'm sorry, I got me the very bad news, but you didn't get picked. And I said, that's okay. I says, I got to the final group. That was just in itself an accomplishment. And I did find out later, there's ways of, I don't want to call it the old Roman days where, either thumbs up, neutral, or thumbs down, and it was kind of that way was, hey, after you get done, one of the things you did in there is you had an hour-long interview. You sat down in front of the board that's going to pick the astronauts, and you talk to them. They learn about you and all that. Well, I asked them, I says, did I make some bonehead statement or did I do something? And the head of the astronaut selection board said, no, Mike, in fact, everybody liked you or thumbs up on all accounts. It's just that there's so many good people that you didn't get picked. And I said, well, it's okay. I said, again, to me, it was a win just getting selected, let alone get along to the final group. So yes, to answer your question, I've wanted to, and a number of years after that, I kept applying, of course, until I got too old. But yeah, if I had a chance, or if I had the money today, I would jump on the next rocket to space if I could. Yes, sir. I would love to do that. Yep.
Yeah, it is an exciting thought. I mean, but let's see what else. What did I usually also ask? You mentioned that the Astro was stopped by the Challenger accident, and what was your career at that time during the Challenger accident? You were just working with Astro?
No, we were actually in a group. Very interesting enough, Scotty mentioned it. We were, the way it kind of works at NASA is you have most of the time the hands-on work, the people that physically turn the bolts, put the cables on, punch the buttons. Those are usually contractors with a NASA person kind of overseeing them, supporting them in responsibility. There are, it's not 100%, but there's a lot of times that's the way it is. With us, we were in a special group called what was called Level 4 Experiment Integration, where, excuse me,
okay,
the only contractor we had was the technicians. The engineering, the quality, the safety, all that was NASA, was us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we basically did the work of a contractor. So we were in this group together. And so part of what we did was the Space Lab program, which started out with basically STS-2 was the first element. But so our job was to work on the hardware, the experiment hardware would fly on a Space Lab mission. It could be a module, it could be all kind of different configurations. With Astro, it was a double pallet configuration you see with the telescopes. The idea is those were exposed to space. There's another configuration, which is a module, it's a pressurized element that was for doing work in a controlled environment, like a normal atmosphere. Well, our job was the experiment. Part of that was to put the experiments together. So we were doing that. Astro was just one of a number of missions we were working on for the Space Lab program. At the time, basically, I think it was the time when we were getting Astro ready, I sat down and I was working 13 different missions at the same time. So we worked a lot of different missions. Astro wasn't our only mission. So it got kind of crazy at time. And so when Challenger happened, we were really busy. A normal day was 12 to 16 hours. I mean, you rarely worked under 12. You normally worked 16. And that went on for weeks. I mean, we would go, I remember a time going 3 weeks, 21 days at 16 hours a day. And that was just the way we did. We were young. We were right out of college. So we'd go for, weeks at a time. It didn't mean anything else. It was just what we thought we needed to do, and we did. When Challenger happened, basically all that came to a screeching halt. That morning, everything stopped. Of course, what would follow is do we continue on? These missions we're working on, which ones would fly, which ones wouldn't fly? Would we even fly at all? And so those couple of years after Challenger was kind of tough. But yeah, so that's what we were working on, this Level 4 Space Lab group, when we had the Challenger accident. And then after that, things kind of changed. One of the things that changed, I guess, was good, was the 16-hour days. They realized if you work 16-hour days, weeks at a time, you're eventually going to lose your edge. You're going to do something maybe stupid. Or just something. You're not going to be thinking properly, and you need to take a break. And so, kind of one of the things that came out of Challenger was no more 16-hour days without approval. You could get approval, but you would have to stop at 12, and you always had a day break. And so you could work 6 days and then take a day break. So that was one of the things that came out of Challenger. And then shortly after Challenger, I actually went on to moved out of the Level 4 Space Lab group and started work other missions. I worked Ulysses mission that went around the sun. I worked the Galileo mission that went to Jupiter. I worked the Magellan mission that went to Venus. And so I worked kind of different payloads at the time, and then went on to work Space Station and eventually retired after working Space Station. So that's kind of the group we worked in and kind of the follow on. So it was working with a lot of different flight hardware. This is a really awesome job. I loved it every minute. Yeah.
So I see the display behind you. Is anything of that any specific significance to that? Any special memorabilia there?
Yeah, that's actually that's a poster I got when I was a kid. It's basically showing all the steps on getting to the moon, landing in the moon, and then coming back. Now the components that make that up. I had this basically when I was 9 years old. It's out of the it was out of the what was it? I guess National Geographic at the time. And so they basically, so I kept that for years and years and years, and eventually I said, well, I need to do something with this. So I put it. I had a friend that was doing frames, and I put it in this frame, and then the patches, what you see on the top and bottom, those are all the Apollo patches from all the missions. I went and actually bought all the Apollo patches, and then basically made this thing you see behind me. So that's kind of like mementos for the Apollo program. I did the same thing kind of for this Gemini and the shuttle and Gemini and Mercury program down here in Cocoa Beach. We would have the big parades down A1A, and one of the parades was with the the Mercury astronauts. So we got to take pictures of them. So I got the pictures of them with their patches from their flights. The Gemini flights, same thing. We had a Gemini parade, and so I got photographs of all the astronauts, and then the missions, the patches from their missions. That's on part of the other wall over here. And then there's other things. There's another one back behind me here that shows the moon. Let me see if I can show that to you real quick. See if you can see it back. See the moon? Basically a Rand McNally map.
Yeah, really cool.
Moon. Yeah, so this is kind of my space room. My wife says this is one place where you can show all your space stuff. One of the things too, and I think it was one of the questions you had before. One of your most favorite mementos. Mine is I got a Silver Snoopy Award from our space station. And for people I don't understand what a Silver Snoopy is, it's an award that's given out by the astronauts on something that you did to make their mission either successful, safe, and that. And I got one for my work on Space Station, and that to me was the best. It was when I got that Silver Snoopy. That's what I always wanted as far as an award. We got awards for all these missions we worked, which were great. Don't take me, nothing wrong with those awards. They were awesome. I literally got boxes of awards from all these missions we worked. But that Silver Snoopy was my favorite and still is my favorite.
Right. This is actually my 9th episode with a guest. And in 9 episodes, I can say that I've had 3 different Silver Snoopy Award winners, 1 episode, a double winner.
That's awesome. That's great.
So if I could just convince more of them to talk to me, I try to convince them to talk to me and see this show.
Well, I got kind of a quick story about that. Can I tell it real quick?
Mm-hmm.
You know what they do with the Silver Snoopy is you don't know what's coming. At least that's the way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
What they would do is they would get you in a meeting, which you think would be just a normal meeting. Okay. And then what happens is as you're in this meeting, your whole family is meeting outside the door. Okay. And they're meeting there, the astronauts there. And so basically sometime during this meeting, they stop and your whole family and an astronaut walks in and they present your award in front of all your colleagues.
That's really pretty cool.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I was working space station, I always, because I was so busy, I always says a meeting is an hour. If it goes longer than an hour, I'm out of there. Well, of course, I get in this meeting, which is supposed to be the Silver Snoopy meeting, and it's going more than an hour. Well, everybody's looking around and I see Mike's about to get up and leave because it's within an hour. What we found out is the astronaut got delayed coming from JSC. They had a problem with weather concerns. So the astronaut was late coming. So it was basically delayed. My family was outside, so I couldn't walk outside the door because my family's out there and give away the surprise. And so basically my boss walks in the meeting just about 5 minutes before I was going to get out and says, Haddad, you need to sit down and listen to me on what I'm going to tell you. And so basically kept me in the room. And so then my whole family comes in. My brother comes in and his wife and my parents. And they come in the room. And so I thought right away, oh, my gosh, I'm getting a Silver Snoopy. Okay. I says, this is just way too cool. Well, the astronaut was a good friend of ours. And she goes, Mike, can you come up here and read the award? And it's like, usually you don't read your own award. And so I go up there, I start reading the award. And it says, this isn't what I do. But this is a Silver Snoopy Award. Well, it was a surprise to my brother Sam, who was in the room. He knew I was getting an award. He didn't know he was getting one at the same time. So I'm reading his Silver Snoopy Award. And he goes, okay, get down the bottom. Says, congratulations, Sam Haddad, on your Silver Snoopy. He goes, what? Is that this is supposed to be for you? So he comes up, basically, gets his award, and then he reads my award. And I get up there. And we found out later what had happened was our friend who was the astronaut, Janet Ross, who's unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. She knew both of us, of course, because we were good friends. She heard that we were both getting Silver Snoopies, but they're going to be at different times. And so Janet says, hey, is there any way that you can combine these two and let me present the award to both of them because they're both my friends? And it was and because of her, she was able to wing it because normally that would be almost impossible to do. And so she was able to get both of us together at the same time for both awards. And from what I understand, that is the only time in NASA that 2 brothers received the Silver Snoopy at the same time. So that was just a great day. That was just
pretty
awesome.
Cool. Yeah, pretty exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And of course, I got that on my wall over here too. One of the other things I got on the wall is my Silver Snoopy. Yep.
Okay.
So that was that.
So I'll just put this up to remind any viewers who are tuning in and out that we are watching Slightly Off Axis podcast. We have tonight's guest is Mike Haddad of Astro Restoration Project. And if you are on YouTube or Facebook, you can ask a question. If you get in here during the live broadcast, those of you who are on Twitter tonight, surprise, surprise, I'm broadcasting to Twitter by mistake because I clicked Twitter by accident instead of Twitch. So I'll have to rebroadcast this on Twitch. And those of you on Twitter can send me a Twitter message if you want to ask him a question. But so far, we haven't got any questions, Mike. I sorry that this is not on the most exciting of nights as far as people tuning in, but maybe, they'll ask questions later. I'm certainly enjoying the show. I might not be smiling all the way through because I have to watch all the computer monitors and all that sort of thing, but I'm enjoying this broadcast. So I'm pleased to have you on tonight.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm enjoying it much too. And again, yeah, if you have any questions in the future, just email them and we'll try to get back answers for you.
Yeah, your enthusiasm is definitely there. Want to ask you about that cap. Um, you know, is that something that's new? Because I have not been myself out to the Visitors Information Center, and I don't know if that's rare and only presented to certain people or whether that's a regular cap. So,
Yeah, this one I got a number of years ago at the Visitor Center. So I don't know if
okay.
they still have these out there or not. But basically, of course, it was created. NASA was created in '58, and so that's kind of what that is a kind of this is kind of the NASA hat I wear a lot of times. When I'm usually doing the restoration project, this is the hat I got on for photos and all that. But yeah, it's a hat I got at the Visitor Center. But oh gosh, it's probably been over 5-6 years that I've had this.
Yeah.
That's where I got it. Yes, sir. Yeah, I don't know if they're still out there or not.
A question that I always had for people is like, how many different launches did you see personally? So in your career, did you get to go and see the launches, or were you so busy during the launch that you couldn't actually watch the launch up close?
That's a great question. I saw all but 3 shuttle launches, and the only 3 I didn't see was because I was flying, I think at the time. Most of them I saw in person. Almost every shuttle launch that I've seen has been in person. Good question about, did we go outside? Yeah, kind of what we did. We were real busy, as we said before, but I would always try to wing it to where, okay, the launch countdown comes down, and then usually there's a 9-minute hold. There's a hold in T-minus 9 minutes. And that's when if they come out in that 9-minute hold, they're going to go for launch. And so I would wait until basically that they came out of the hold, and I would try to time it that day, depending on what we're doing. Say, hey, let's take a break. We don't have something hanging in the crane at the time, and then leave it hanging from the crane. And so I would try to schedule things around to make sure there wasn't anything really critical happening that day. So I go out and watch launch, because I would always say, let's take a break. I'm going to go out and watch launch. And so that's what I would do, is I would always take a break and go outside to watch the launch. And of course, with landings too. A lot of landings, Kennedys they came right over when they were landing from the south to the north. They would come basically right over our building. And so for landings, we do the same thing. I take a break and go out to see the landings and stuff. So yeah, so all but 3 shuttle launches I've seen personally. Yes, sir. Yep.
Now, curiosity, like, where were you when you're seeing a launch? Do you know, like, where you were in reference to these launch packages that they sell nowadays? Were you in like the VIP stands, or?
Most of the time, no. Most of the time, we were out in front of our building, which was the operations and checkout building, which was in the south part of Kennedy Space Center. Sometimes, if we had time, we would go out to near the VAB, Vehicle Assembly Building, right next to the Launch Control Center, and watch it out there. Sometimes it would be in the VIP site. Sometimes they'd get us to volunteer as a tour guide, so we'd be at a number of the VIP sites. So to answer your question, it was in many different locations based on kind of what was happening that day. If we were real busy, I would just basically step outside the building. If it was a slow day, I would usually try to go out closer to the launch, basically where you see the big countdown clock and where all the news media was there. That's where we would go to watch the launch from there.
So is that countdown clock, is that at the Visitors Information Center, like 8 miles away, or?
It was it's about 3 miles away. It was basically at the press site. And so you have basically as close as you can get, except for a certain crew. That blue cow used to be outside, east of the Launch Control Center, right in front of the press site, is where it used to be. So you had the big grandstands that people would sit in. You had the buildings like ABC, NBC that were next to the grandstands. And then out in front of that, between that and the launch pad, was a big blue countdown clock. So what they did, they've actually changed that from the shuttle program. They moved it actually to the visitor center. When you walk into the entrance to the visitor center, the big blue countdown clock now is there. They replaced it with a more advanced, where you got, display screens and all that, where before it was just a big mechanical kind of clock. So, yep. Yeah. That's where it used to be. Yeah. It used to be, that's how we always tell people, right by the big blue clock. We would go there. Sometimes we'd be doing, I remember doing my brother Sam and Sam did a lot more than I did, but we would do tour guides in some of the, like, for VIPs, like Peter Frampton. Peter Frampton became a real good friend of ours because him and his son used to come to a number of launches. And my brother Sam and I would do the tour from him, basically help him get out to the press site or the visitors site, or not the visitors, the VIP site, and we would sit with him and his son during the launch and talk to him and stuff. So my brother did a number of people. He did. I remember if you ever heard of the Woz, the gentleman that helped create Apple Computer with Steve Jobs. My brother did a tour with him. In fact, he done a couple of them with the Woz. So my brother's done a number of VIPs as well as myself. We did actually the entourage for John Glenn. When John Glenn flew, my brother and I did the tours for the supported them during the launch when John Glenn flew. Yeah. So, yep.
Okay. I'm just getting personal messages. So I wish they were about the show, but the problem is the person who's sending me personal messages, I forgot to send that person a link to the show.
Oh no.
That's something I should learn to do, is like send links to people that have a tendency to message me, but whatever. Some people have checked in tonight though. We've had viewers pop in, and we did get one reaction. So we did have a couple of viewers pop in and watch. Maybe they'll watch later because they're too busy right now. I don't know.
That could be, yep.
I was just curious about that because, the distance, because I'm not sure what all the different packages are for Artemis. I know they've sold the two that are up close, and I had the opportunity almost to buy the one at the Visitor Information Center, which is 8 miles away. And I was wondering like how much differently it would look from there versus like over from Titusville, where you're roughly about 12 miles away. So
they're different. Yeah, definitely the VIP site's the best because you get a direct view of the pad.
Right.
The one at the Visitor Center, you're closer, but you sometimes maybe don't have a direct view of the launch pad. And then, of course, from Titusville, you're farther away. But again, from there, you got kind of more of a direct view of the pad, but you're kind of isolated from everything because you're so far away.
Right.
That's just it varies on kind of what you want to do. And I don't know if they've for Artemis. You see what they used to do for shuttles. Of course, we had the car passes and we had the VIP sites and all. I'm not sure how much of that are doing for Artemis now. I mean, you used to be able to just drive up to the gate and they get your car pass and you just keep driving for the shuttle program, but they don't do that anymore. No.
Yeah, they have different things, but the thing is I had something I had to do for the November 14th date, and I didn't want to conflict with that. Be tired going to something that I had to do later in that day, and then of course it moved.
Never fails.
Such is life, And I was like, shoot, I should have bought it, but yeah, whatever.
Hopefully we'll get off on the 16th. We'll see. They're shooting for the 16th now, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we're recording this tonight on the 10th in case people watch this later and don't know what night this is happening on. So folks, we have no idea what's going to happen on the 16th, and we don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully we wish Artemis well. We're about an hour and 18 minutes into this, and I just kind of wonder, are you ready to go? Do you want to, come back?
I just want to make sure I answered everything that you wanted me to talk about. So
I know that there was an invitation either by yourself or one of the other team members on the Astro Restoration Project to come actually see the project in Huntsville.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And so what are we looking at an expected timeline for when everything should be complete?
Yeah, it depends. If we get the instruments before the end of the year, which is kind of tight now because we're already in November, maybe by next summer, taking a wild guess, maybe we would have all the instruments. Yeah, next summer or fall, well, maybe a year from now, we would have the other instruments on. Of course, that changes, but the idea would be is maybe get you there for maybe one of the instrument installations when one of the instruments are actually physically going on. So you see kind of something happening, see how something happening and be part of that event. And again, we have no idea kind of when that happens, going to happen. We need a couple things is, of course, Hutton UIT are up in the Smithsonian right now. So we need to get them to Huntsville. The other thing I was talking earlier about the brackets where for Whoopi and OSP, the brackets for those items were still on the cruciform. for the Hutton UIT experiment, they're gone. And so that half of what was there for the other instruments we don't have. So we basically have to build twice as much hardware as we did for the first two, because the hardware is not there that we had for the other two. So that's going to take some time to build those brackets, and then of course install the instruments. So it'd probably be, again, maybe summer next year, but we definitely can keep you involved. And of course you can ping. We try to put out the Astro Restoration. I think it's like a monthly newsletter, kind of describing kind of the latest and greatest, and then also maybe things that are coming up in the future. And as we get closer to stuff like that, we can hone in on a date. Right now, it's still up in the air because we still haven't got the instruments from the Smithsonian. So we're not sure how long, that process will take. Of course, understandably, they want to make sure that, the people they're giving this hardware to is going to take good care of it. So there's a process they go through on basically letting hardware from their place to go somewhere else. So we're going through that process right now. And so to answer your question, yeah, that'd be awesome. You could sure come and see that if you want to come even now, and sometime when we go back up there for an event, something else, maybe when Hutton UIT arrive, there for the arrival, and then we could talk and we could show you the stuff, and then have to wait a year until the hardware goes on. So yeah, definitely invitations open to you, and then of course anybody else out there that of course wants to see this. It's a living display. It's really cool the way they got it set up. They got us on a whole corner of their atrium. And it's a living display. And when we go work there, we're working there during the day, and people come up and we talk to them and answer questions. Or like now, there's nobody working, but you could still go up and see it. We got a number of different posters and all. You can read all about the mission. So there's a lot of stuff to see. It's there right now. So if people want to go up and see it. But of course, as we get farther down the road, get more instruments, it's going to get more exciting as we get closer to basically having the package kind of in a flight configuration. Yeah, it'll be at least a year or so probably before that happens. Yeah, just taking a guess.
So, getting close to the hour and a half that we did with the other podcast. I really don't want to keep you too late tonight. Don't want to belabor the point. I think we could have you back, as we said, at another time when we have more to discuss about the project. We do have one viewer who has checked in, so we're saying hello to Nathaniel Story for checking in with us. Nathaniel, do you have a question for Mr. Haddad here? Mike can answer your question if you've been watching and have some questions about what you're seeing tonight. If you have a question, by all means, ask it in chat. So, but it's been wonderful, as I said, having you on.
Thank you.
I'm going to I don't remember if do I have banners for the group? I unfortunately, I do have my email. If you want to send me an email later to ask about the show. So that's something that people can do. And if I had an email for the restoration project, I can pull back up the presentation for that. So let me do that. And click. So it's on the bottom of this. So I'll put that up. So just to put that up and solo that. So Astro Restoration Project at info@astrorestorationproject.org or at www.astrorestorationproject.org if you want to know more about it. So
yeah, no, again, Maynette, who was on this last broadcast, she's very, very good at keeping that basically up to date. So as things happen, she'll update that site. So she's very, very good at that, keeping that kind of up to date and what's going on. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good place to go. That's a good place to go.
He didn't comment in the actual live comments, but Nathaniel just sent me a message saying, fantastic show, really enjoyed it. So
Thank
So
you.
maybe he was watching, popping back and forth, or he's going to come back and watch it later. I'm not sure. So at least we got one or two comments and a couple of reactions, likes and loves. So that's
Sweet.
nice.
Yes, sir. Excellent.
But yeah, I think that it's been a good show. I think that I'm going to let you go for now, and we'll talk to you at a later date about the progress of the Astro Restoration Project. And it'll be great to have you back again at that time. Obviously, if you talk to other Silver Snoopy Award winners, or if you talk to these people that are even volunteers on your team that have stories to tell about space, encourage them to be on my show because I need more guests.
Okay.
So share my information with them. That's the one thing I ask of you. And thank you again, Mike, for being on the show.
You're welcome. I had a lot of fun, Ken. Thank you for the invite.
Okay.
Really appreciate that, sir.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care, y'all.
Bye. So that was Mike Haddad with Astro Restoration Project, and I'm Ken Otto with Slightly Off Axis Podcast, the podcast that talks to people that work in space or who have space careers. And hopefully we'll have more guests. Next week, I'm working on a few. I had a few. I just have to keep reaching out to them to get them to commit to dates. So let's see how that works out. But I'll be back as soon as I have a guest. So stay tuned for more episodes of Slightly Off Axis Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.